the reality is that we use 100% of our brain, but it's not 100% of its potential. So there's a big difference there. Our brain and what it can do for us is really no small thing. It can do some incredible things. It's a 100 billion neural bit processor, but most people never slow it down enough to figure out what it's doing.
You're listening to the Live Life Longer show with Dan Voss, helping people live longer through natural practices like cold exposure, sauna use, breathwork, intermittent fasting, and the healing powers of nature. In this week's episode, my guest is Dr. Patrick Porter, an award-winning author and speaker who has devoted his career to neuroscience and brainwave entertainment. As the creator of BrainTap, Dr. Porter has emerged as a leader in the digital health and wellness field. BrainTap's digital tools and mind development apps use creative visualization and relaxation and biohacking techniques that have made tremendous advances in helping mental, physical, and emotional health issues. BrainTap has been praised for helping people relieve symptoms associated with stress, insomnia, pain, and much more. Dr. Porter, welcome to the Live Life Longer show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation and getting more into your expertise and talking more about BrainTap. I briefly mentioned BrainTap in the intro there, but why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about BrainTap and what it does?
Okay. Well, BrainTap is kind of my life's work. I started very young. My dad was an alcoholic, so he got help with something called technology-driven meditation. And they were teaching him to go into what they called level, which was really alpha. But the church elders came over, the priest and the sister came in, Dr. Fitzpatrick and Sister Mary, and they took my dad and they taught him. And when my dad used this meditation, he stopped drinking. And he had a really hard time, but what he found out was he was using the drinking to shut off his survivor brain, and he wasn't able to connect with that thriving brain. I mean, he would disconnect, but it was in a bad way. So he thought, hey, this is good enough for me. I'm going to take it back home to my 9 kids. And we started practicing with it. So even though my background was in electronics, so what I was able to do was go to school for electronics, and then with my background say, how can I mimic nature? I noticed one of your things about getting out into nature. What we've done is, how can we mimic nature? And I was looking at how do ancient cultures do these things naturally, and how can we use the technology of the day? So we've been evolving this over the last 30 years. And what we have now, BrainTap is kind of the latest generation of this light, sound, and vibration program that is designed to really balance, reboot, and rejuvenate nervous system function. And we focus on the brain because 70% of your nervous system is in your brain. So let's get the nervous system regulating correctly. And what we find is that we started actually in pain control because we were working with biofeedback. There was no neurofeedback back then, so that's how far back it is. And we know that if you can make your hands warm, for instance, you won't have a headache. That's because when your hands are warm, you have greater circulation, blood flow through the body, and you can then that greater blood flow and circulation means more oxygen, so you lose that pain. Also, breathing techniques, which you mentioned at the big front of is key to what we do because I was fortunate to study with a gentleman named Yogi Bhajan who brought Kundalini Yoga to America in the 80s. And I couldn't afford yoga classes at that time, but you could go at 3:30 in the morning for free. So I spent a number of years going there, training with them, learning the breath work, what they call pranayama. And we really simplified it. I direct people through BrainTap. They don't really know they're learning these breath techniques, but they're breathing techniques that I'm explaining during the process. So some of the processes are just light. Some are light in sound. Some are light sound in words. But we can kind of delve a little bit deeper into that and why we chose what we chose for each of those. But the main thing is that as we live our lives, not just through this, what we've gone through in 2020, which is very stressful, but the reality is that most people were living their life with low-level chronic stress even before then, and that stress is an interrupter for every function of the body, even down to if you're taking nutritional supplements. We've shown that if you can get the parasympathetic system, which is what we can do with the BrainTap to get that to relax, that thriving brain, we have one study that showed 30% more nutrient absorption into the brain. So we're talking about when the body's relaxed, it functions better, but it also absorbs all those good nutrients you're taking. And especially for those people now that want to do those what are now commonly called health hacks, where you want to accelerate your healing, this is one of the techniques.
Wow, it's so cool. I love that you've taken modern technology and what we have readily available today and coupled that with practices that have been around for centuries, with breathwork and yoga and some of the other elements that brain tapping incorporates. So when I hear someone say that they're brain tapping, what does that mean?
Well, when they're brain tapping, they could be using the app alone or they could be using the headset. But what's happening is we say tap into the brain's full potential. The reality is that we use 100% of our brain, but it's not the 100% of its potential. So there's a big difference there. Our brain and what it can do for us is really no small thing. It can do some incredible things. It's a 100 billion neural bit processor, but most people never slow it down enough to figure out what it's doing. And like Bruce Lipton, who's one of our instructors at Quantum University, where I head up the brain-based wellness program, he says that 95% of our life is controlled by our subconscious. But most people are trying to change their subconscious to their conscious mind, which takes a long time. So what we're talking about is speeding up, accelerating the change. To give you an example, we did a study in Australia where we took people who were doing music therapy, which we know it really works well. In fact, in science, they call it the Mozart effect, where your brain actually balances and works better because you're using this Baroque classical kind of music. Or new agey music that they have now without drums, and your brain actually synchronizes into the alpha state. Well, you learn better. So we know that works. So what we did is we said, what if we took people that just did that music, and then we encoded that same music with our algorithm? And the algorithm uses binaural beats, isochronic tones, and some different frequencies like Nogier or solfeggio frequencies. We all hear about the negative frequencies like 5G, 3G, and all these. Those are negative frequencies. There's also healing frequencies that Rife and Dr. Nogier they had figured those out, and they actually documented those. So we're using those frequencies because we know the body responds. And we use brainwave entrainment because in physics, there's something called entrainment. To give an example, tuning forks are an entrainment. So if I took two tuning forks, I knocked one on the table, it started resonating. The tuning fork that's within sound of that will start resonating. Well, believe it or not, that happens with everything in the physical universe. When you, Dan, walk into a room, your resonant frequency is changing the resonance of the room. We all know people when they walk in the room, it becomes a little brighter. We also know people when they walk in the room, it becomes a little darker. So people have this. We have this frequency. Well, nature does that too. So in brain tapping, what we're doing is we're going to take them through. We're going to use light. So let me kind of correlate this back to the ancient times. There's a meditation called a Jyoti meditation, which is you look at a candle, and while you're looking at that candle, you breathe just enough to get the candle to flicker. Well, that candle's flickering at 10 hertz frequency. That happens to be alpha. That also happens to be when you're in the 10 hertz frequency, you get what we call a gamma burst, which we now know is really important for clearing out amyloid plaque. And you get a delta burst, which we know is also really important for detoxing the brain. You get that when you cross the 10 hertz frequency barrier. Also, again, when you cross the 7.8 hertz frequency barrier. Now, those two frequencies are really important in our brain. Mainly, and I should kind of step back a little bit, if Dan, you and I were on my spaceship traveling toward Earth, and we looked at Earth on our machines that could measure the frequency response of the Earth has a frequency response between 0.01 and 100. Well, our brain does the same thing. Our brain has a frequency response of 0.01 to 100. So most of us don't get up into that 100 range, but they've actually had some monks up to 300 hertz frequency. So they're way up there. They're the ones that they put ice cold blankets on them and they heat them up and they start steaming because our body is a generator or a transducer of energy. So when somebody's brain tapping, what they're doing, like the candle, when they're mimicking that candle, but we don't have a candle there, what we've done is we've taken the same frequencies, we put them into LEDs. And the LEDs, the lights on our LEDs have about the same millijoules in our eyes as a candle would. So they can't hurt you. Some of our autistic children that use it can keep their eyes open. It doesn't even matter. It won't harm you. We also have lights in the ears. And the reason is that every cell of our body has what's called chromophores. What a chromophore is, think of it like a solar panel. Every cell of your body absorbs light energy and sound energy and converts it to ATP. If it does it effectively, then we have a lot of energy. And all you have to do is think about the last time you went to a party or a concert. You really didn't want to be there, but then they started playing songs that you knew when you were a child, and your foot started to tap, and you started getting the energy, and pretty soon you're dancing. That's because your body is always converting its environment to energy, or it's taking away its energy, right? There's some things like 5G that cost us energy because our body's trying to keep its balance. And so if we're fed positive in energy, like they say in China and Japan, when you walk through the forest, they call it forest bathing. What we're going to do with BrainTap is we're going to put you into the same physiological state as if you're sitting near the ocean for a while. That's 10 hertz frequency. The ocean has a resonant frequency of 10 hertz. So when you're around a body of water, you probably heard, Dan, somebody say, I love the ocean. I love sitting by the waves. Well, there's a reason for that. When we're sitting by the waves and our brain is in tuning or in training to the ocean, what happens is it goes to alpha. Alpha tells the gut to produce acetylcholine. So now you have this feel-good neurotransmitter raging through your body, the same as you would have if you were in love with somebody. But now your brain says, it must be the ocean doing that. In reality, it was you doing that in response to the ocean. So our brain created the neurotransmitters, or our gut created the neurotransmitters mostly. 8% is made in the brain. The other 92% are made in the gut. When we got to that 7.8 hertz frequency that I said is the next one, that happens to be the resonant frequency of a mountain. So if they call it the Schumann frequency, 7.8 hertz frequency. So when somebody says, why do gurus meditate in the mountains? Well, in science now, we have what we call isochronic tone generators. You can actually buy online Schumann frequency generators. You can put them in your home. You can put them in your place of work. A lot of spas use them. So when you walk in, you actually have this feeling like you're on vacation or you're in a resort area, because the body responds. Everything that we see, hear, and experience in our world through our senses is not real. It's basically interpreted. And most people don't understand that our brain is interpreting over 80% of our reality all the time. It doesn't have time to process reality in real time. So our brain is always making things up. And the best example I can give the listener is if you go into the kitchen and you know there was a salt shaker there, or your spouse says, hey, the salt shaker's on the counter, will you bring it out? And you're going, it's not there, I'm looking everywhere. And finally they get fed up, they come up from the table, they go to the kitchen, they see it's right there in front of you, and you go, it wasn't there a minute ago. That's because in psychology, they actually call it a stickoma, which is after the Bible quote where you can't see the sin in another with a stick in your eye. But the reality is that we all have blind spots. So when you're doing your BrainTap session, what's happening is you're going through a cycle of sleep. During that cycle of sleep, you're rebuilding your neurotransmitter bank account. In fact, we found that in the morning when you do an AM session, we call these digital coffee, because in the morning we need to wake the brain up. And with 1/3 of the world not sleeping well, the problem isn't just at night. The problem starts first thing in the morning. They're not grounding. You're not getting outside. They're not doing what they need to do. They're not focused and centered. Their brain is still in delta. In fact, with about 30,000 scans we've done over the last 10 years, we found that over 90% of the people we scan are over 60% delta while they're awake. You should only have about 7 to 10% delta while you're awake. All the brain waves are available so when you're doing the BrainTap session, you're going through each of these brain waves. Your body's tuning in each of these frequencies. Think of them like healthy Wi-Fi, because they're telling your body what to do. Beta, where we're talking right now, is your reactionary mind. We need that to have conversations, to interact, to do things. You can slip into alpha, which is kind of that place where you go when you're in love or playing a sport you like, or maybe gardening, doing things you love. And then you have theta, which is the threshold of sleep. Then you have delta. So what we're going to do is we're going to cycle through those. And as you cycle through them, you get a reboot. So in the middle of the day, when somebody does our sessions for 20 minutes, what they find in our research is that we can reclaim over 80% of the energy you had in the morning. So basically, reboot. Now, the reason this is important, Dan, is that every day, every person around the world at 2 o'clock, you have a temperature drop. It's the way our body resets from the light of the sun. It's not just Superman that gets his power from the sun. That sun gives us power too, and it tells our body what to do at different times of the day. Now, what do? If we're in the UK, we go have tea. If we're in America, we go have a coffee or go get a sweet, because our body has shifted, changed it. What our body's designed to do, because these bodies were designed for the Serengeti. They weren't designed for Chicago or North Carolina or upper Canada, wherever you're at. The reality is that these bodies were designed to take naps during the middle of the day, just like all the other animals on the Serengeti. But we don't have time for that. So we can do it's a 20-minute reboot that gives you the same effects as a 4-hour nap. And then we have our sessions in the evening when you're brain tapping. Maybe your brain is dysregulated. As we get better looking and more intelligent with age, certain things happen to our nervous system. It starts to dysregulate, and stress accelerates that problem. So we've all been to parties where somebody's introduced 3 or 4 people to us, and we had every intention of remembering their names. And 20 minutes later, we're caught in the corner talking to somebody that we were just introduced to. They remember our name. They go, "Hey, Dan, what's going on?" You're going, "Oh, I don't know their name." And then as soon as the conversation's over, they walk away, and you walk away, and the stress of that moment's gone. Their name pops in your head because that stress stops it. So what we want to do with BrainTap is, number one, rehearse our day-to-day experience. Could you imagine watching your favorite movies or your favorite TV shows and they never rehearsed? Well, people are doing this every day with their life. And then at the end of the day, they go, "I can't believe I gained this weight," or "I can't believe I'm still smoking. I can't believe," or you don't have to have problems to use BrainTap. We also have some for sports because we work with a lot of professional sports teams and Olympians. But it's, most of the time it's some discomfort. So during BrainTap, you're really focusing this incredible power we all have, this focus of attention, because what we think about, we bring about. But if you're not thinking about it, guess what you're bringing about? What you've always brought about, because it's on unconscious programming. So you're really upgrading. I tell people you can upgrade your own software, or you can let, Windows or Apple system upgrade for you. I mean, I prefer to upgrade my own software.
Wow. Yeah, so much of what you just talked about, I enjoy myself and incorporating into my life. I was out grounding this morning. I went out for a walk with my dog, and I just wore my flip-flops instead of socks and shoes. And once we got into the park, I was able to just plant my bare feet onto the ground. And actually, after our recording here, I'm going to head over to Lake Michigan and spend some time on the beach there and do a cold plunge because the water is still fairly cold here. And it's things like that literally helps me, ground. So I'm happy you're talking about that. I want to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned a lot of the benefits and who can benefit from BrainTap. You mentioned if you do the 20-minute session that, kind of replicates sleep, that replicates 4 hours of sleep, you said? Did I get that correct?
It's equivalent. I mean, you still need to sleep. The
Sure.
one thing that we're missing in the BrainTap session is you need that deep delta burst. Actually, in 2016, Scientific America came out with a report that said that the medical community had finally found out that we have lymphatic vessels in our brain, which everybody who took physiology knows they were always there. It wasn't discovered. It's like discovering Columbus in America. The reality is that, but they call them glial lymphomic cells. Now, these work just like getting supplements into the brain. We have that blood-brain barrier. So we need to, the only time those open, like those are closed doors, the only time those open is during deep delta sleep. And some people might have woke up in the middle of the night and they had sleep paralysis. They couldn't move. The reality is what they did was they woke up in the middle of one of these cleaning cycles. Now, BrainTap doesn't do that, but what it'll do is if you can offload some of that stress before sleep. If you've ever done a sleep study, you'll see the first sleep cycle takes sometimes up to 3 or 4 hours to get through, but then they're very quick after that. And the reason it takes so long to get into that deep sleep is you've got to offload all that stress. Our body is like a capacitor, and what a capacitor does in an electronic circuit, it builds up energy. So we build up energy through the day. And when you're grounding, what happens, what's really nice, is that you're grounding all that extra energy because our body is collecting energy. Now, when it's healthy energy, we're cycling it through, it's no problem. But we're collecting energy from the lights, from the environment, from electric signals. But the nice thing is that we can ground those into the earth. As long as we're grounded, like I'm standing here talking to you, I have a grounding pad right here where I'm standing on. So It's like I'm standing outside because I do a lot with Clint Oper and earthing. And when we saw what it did, we actually use it in all the clinics. We recommended on all the clinic chairs because it brings down inflammation by 25%. So it's a pretty incredible technology. But you can go outside for free. I mean, you don't have to buy it. You can just walk outside. The earth is free. So part of it is when you're doing that is it's about how do we break the pattern of stress. And most people don't even know they're stressed. I tell people it's like that Bruce Willis movie where it says, I see dead people and they don't know they're dead. I see stressed out people and they don't know they're stressed. Think about when we walk around our environment, people are just so stressed. They don't know what's going on. And you need that time to stop, reflect. Even Olympic athletes, we find when we do our scans with them, they are training to the max. Their problem isn't their training regimen usually. Their problem is their restore regimen. How are they resting, relaxing, restoring health after the stressful event? Because we all are going to face stress. The problem is if you can't disengage, and that's where heart rate variability comes in reading those monitors. And now that we all have smart devices, we can actually follow our own HRV and find out if we're disengaging or not.
Sure. So is this something that would benefit athletes as well? Are there elements to brain tapping that can improve performance?
Yeah, we have, we're set up right now in Sporting KC, which is a professional soccer team in St. Louis. They have a 20-station BrainTap room that they use after every practice. And they use the decompressing boots that bring the bad blood out of the body.
Sure.
We're also in the middle of an Olympic trial right now, a research program partnered with WAVI, which is a brain scanning technology which we use, which we can measure concussions, like what's your brain state before the concussion and after, and bringing people back. And the nice thing was when we got involved with them was they have thousands of doctors around the country, and the doctors that were using BrainTap were getting 100 to 125% quicker results than the others. And they said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Well, we're sending them home with BrainTap." And the reason for that is blood flow and circulation. If you can get more blood flow circulation, that's what light therapy does. So if people know everything you read about with red light therapy that's out there, LED or laser, it doesn't matter the color as much. I mean, that does have some effect, but the reality is it's the photic effect. It's how our body responds to energy. And as long as the right frequencies are there, red light between, 610 and 650, or 810 and 850, or blue 470 to 500, those are going to be healthy frequencies for the body, and the body will respond to them. So recovery becomes really good. And with our Olympic athletes, what we find is that's part of the recovery time. I mean, and we have a lot of professional. The nice thing is if somebody goes on social media, just puts in hashtag BrainTap, they're going to see a lot of UFC fighters, a lot of MMA fighters, because we've done some research in neuroprotectiveness of the brain. We've all had concussions, and really it's how did our brain remodel around those concussions? As a child, they say we fall down between 3,000 to 5,000 times, depending upon how. I must have done it 7,000 times, because we were crazy. We were never allowed in the house. There were 9 of us, so we had to be outside playing all the time. And how did our brain recover from that? And that's really what we're talking about. So athletes use it, but we also have, when we worked with the Olympic gymnast, this was 2 Olympics ago, I designed a Sport Zone series for them, because when you think of the Olympic athlete, especially these girls that are doing gymnastics, they're all great. I mean, their performance levels are pretty much across the board the same. It's what's happening between their ears that's going to make the difference. How do they handle stress? How do they recover from an injury? And that's, we find that how do people recover after a trauma? And so part of BrainTap is my background, besides being positive psychology, is I was trained by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, the founders of NLP, back in the 80s. So, and I've been trained by about 60 other people. There's a lot of great trainers out there. But what I wanted to find out was how can we change their psychology to change their physiology? And we know there's a direct connection to that. There's also a connection between your physiology and your psychology. So for those people wondering, like walking is one of the best things you can do for your brain. Just getting out and walking, because it's a whole brain activity. So there's a lot of things, and exercise is probably even ranks, unfortunately, ahead of BrainTap, because we need to exercise our body. Our body is designed to move and breathe. If we don't move and breathe, it's not going to function very well.
Yep, 100%. It's interesting you mentioned concussions. I played football up until I was about 18 years old, my senior year of high school. I definitely had a few concussions, luckily mild, I think, and I don't think I have any noticeable effects in terms of like negative effects long term. I hope not. But is that something that, brain tapping, that I would get some good use out of, knowing that in my past I've suffered from concussions?
Yes. One thing is that you could still have a concussed brain. The brain, as we're younger, what happens is we have more brain space to move all those memories, all those duties to. So the brain is really good at reorganizing and getting it to work. As we get older, unfortunately, we don't have as much transactional information. They call it neuroplasticity. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, you can improve that because the brain, the nice thing about the brain, like the liver, it can regenerate itself. So when somebody says, 20 years ago, if we were having this conversation, they would have said the brain isn't plastic at all. I mean, you have your brain, you damage it, that's the way it is. You have to live with it the rest of your life. Now they know that there are foods you can consume, exercise like hyperbaric chambers, get more oxygen into the body. There's IVs you can do for the brain to bring amino acids in. And of course, things like BrainTap using light, sound, and vibration to train the brain. And it's more, used to be, you get a concussion, go into the dark room, sit in the dark. They now know that's probably the worst thing you can do for the brain. The brain wants to be used. Now, you can't use light quickly. Like because we have shown over 30% greater blood flow to the brain by using BrainTap. So sometimes that's too much at first. So they'll just use the sound. While we're talking here, and the listeners, your brain, through your hearing, is bringing in 25,000 pieces of information every second. But what our brain does really well is it filters out what's really important to us, and we're only acting on 40%. For instance, if you and I were at, Luminalti's having a pizza there in Chicago, right, and we're having this conversation, and somebody across the way says, "Hey, did you see Riverside FM? They have this platform that does." Well, because we know what that is, our brain would perk up, even if it was 2 tables away. That's called our reticular activating system. So even though we're not acting on that, I tell people it's kind of like Siri or these smart devices in your home. When you say Alexa, it's not listening, but how did it know I just said Alexa?
Right.
It's listening. That's what our subconscious is doing. It's always listening. It's always now, what it acts upon is what's most important to us. That's why setting goals or setting intentions or journaling or doing BrainTap sessions or meditation, these are all really important because they keep things at the top of your mind. If you keep it at the top of your mind, then your subconscious acts upon that information. If you don't spend time on it, then the subconscious thinks, oh, that's not important. We're just going to keep going back to the default network, is what they call it. We have this, some people call it the default network, some people call it the reticular activating system. Science calls it the reticular activating system, but now neuroscience is now calling it the default mode network because it kind of works automatically without our awareness.
Sure. Super interesting. You were talking about, the example you used was a gymnast and how, overall they're all pretty much at the same performance level, talent level, but what it comes down to is what's happening between their ears, right? What's in their brain, their psychology, if they can control their nerves. Can you talk a little bit more about brain tapping and how it improves like the visualization aspect, and then how it might even tap into something like creativity and help us be more creative?
Right. Okay, those are 2 very important things for us right now, right, in our world. So because we have a frontal lobe, this is the front part of our brain right here that makes up for us the mass of our brain activity. That part of our brain actually is the most important for both of those items, for visualization and for creative thinking. Now, the problem is that our brain is designed, because we've conditioned it, when we close our eyes, the first thing that happens is our frontal lobe shuts down because it thinks it's time for sleep. So this is the problem with meditation. And some people call it the monkey mind, right? This mind that just goes crazy when you close your eyes. That's because it's designed to do that. Now, the secret is to be awake, but your body be asleep, and monitor those thoughts. So at first, it's going to be a lot of chatter there until you clear it out and use it. So the way that BrainTap works is because we're using light. Most people don't know this, but 30% of your hearing comes in through your eyes, not through your ears. If you've ever been to a lecture where you're sitting in the back of the lecture hall and the person's talking, but you can't understand them, but as soon as you move your attention, so now you can see, you have a direct line of sight with that person speaking, now you can hear them, that's because our primitive reflexes, that part of our brain that records information that says, this is important to me, now I can understand it. You were hearing it before, but it wasn't meaningful because your eyes were somewhere else. So think about our bodies designed or evolved 100,000 years ago. We didn't care about what was out there 200 yards. We cared about what was 2 yards away from us. So it was wherever we were looking. So it's kind of like this, we're looking around, and then that's the only thing our brain processes. So as we do this, what happens with BrainTap is we can really narrow a person's focus, because you're hearing in your ears, you're hearing binaural beats, isochronic tones, and these frequencies, but they're unconscious to you. You might hear a little thumping every once in a while, but then you're going to hear music laid on top of it. That music is a rhythm and cadence, and your brain is literally trying to figure it out. And the main thing here with creativity and with visualization is we need to get your whole brain into the program. Okay? As we get older, or if you have attention deficit or hyperactivity, your brain's usually out of balance. So the first thing we need to do with BrainTap is we have exercises, and we have probably 40 different ones that are mixed up through our 1,000 different sessions. And this is where we exercise the brain to create this whole brain effect. Once you have this whole brain effect, you actually, because there's light coming in too, we're keeping the rods and cones open in the visualization process. So by doing that, the mechanism of visualization is being basically lubricated, would be maybe the best way to say that. And then we create what's called a Gaussian field. Our brain creates this field. Everything that we see in our world is actually being visualized in our brain. We're not, when I reach out and I touch my mic or I touch the screen, I'm touching it in here because there's nothing out there. We know it's out there because we'd be locked up and crazy if we didn't know. But the reality is that we're processing it through our senses. So we can train our brain to have just as lucid dreams as this reality, but it takes time and practice. One of the things that a lot of people will say was, why am I having all these dreams now that I'm using BrainTap? That's because we dream when we go through those cycles like we're talking about with sleep. When we're going into that sleep cycle, we go through alpha and theta, and then back down into delta, and then back up again. Hopefully we don't bounce up into beta. That's when we wake up and we have to go to the bathroom or something like that, or a loud noise happens. But if we can stay in those, we visualize in alpha and theta. We don't visualize in delta because we're too deep. That's when you fall asleep on the couch and they can't move you. They go, man, you were out. You were done. But when you're in alpha and theta, that visualization comes natural to us. And so those rods and cones that do that in that process, and we're waking up the pituitary pineal gland because we're feeding it energy. Now, the brain uses 25% of all the energy stores of the body, and it only weighs 3 to 5 pounds. So when you visualize, you are using a lot of energy. That's why when people start to meditate, they fall asleep. They don't realize that they're using the biggest energy hog of the system. So and so you're training something that's used to self-regulating, and it could be self-regulating really well. I mean, a lot of people out there, their brain's regulating pretty well. But if it's not, if you have depression, anxiety, fear, you're not sleeping well, you get anxious. These are signs of an imbalanced brain. And of course, they try to do it with drugs, right? The reality is there's a really good book out called Suggestible You. And he goes into the placebo effect, and everything is really the placebo effect. And the reality now is the placebo effect's up to 40%. He's saying that SSRIs would not pass the drug test any longer. They've never been. Nothing has ever beat the sugar pill.
Yeah.
So that tells us our own brain's neurochemistry. I like to tell people you have the most powerful pharmacy on earth.
Yep.
All you have to do is know how to trigger it. And we trigger it. So, if we were still in the Serengeti, let's say, and we're out there hunting and gathering, when it starts to get dark, we know, hey, let's get back to our home because we're going to be dinner out here. And then we start a fire, right? To sit by the fire, we're talking. That fire is emanating infrared light while it's burning. So the brain is literally going through light. The light from that fire is conditioning us to relax. Just like using red light at night instead of having the full spectrum light going, the brain is being conditioned. So they've done this in nature, and we just knew it naturally. And then when the lights go down, they don't go, okay, we're going to go back in the woods to get more wood. No, they go, nope, it's time for sleep. We just burned our wood for the night. Because we have lights, we can turn them all on and stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then roll out of bed, pop open our laptop, and go to work. That's totally different scenario than the help what our body really needs in a healthy way.
Yeah, it's so true. It's fascinating to have conversations like this where we realize we were doing, like the example you gave, hunter and gatherer days, we were doing things that were natural, and we didn't have to think about it or look into reasons why. It just came naturally. And to your point, we've reversed that so much with today's modern world and today's technology, especially in today's era where people are working from home more. And like you said, you're not even having a commute necessarily for a lot of people, where they might have to walk to the train station or walk to the office or drive or whatever, walk from the parking lot to into the office. We literally hop out of bed and you can open up your laptop. It's an interesting time. How about any disclaimers for BrainTap? Is it for anyone? Is it not for anyone in particular?
Well, I think anyone can use the sound. We've never had any adverse effects with the sound part of it. As long as you can listen to music and relax, you should be fine with our app. But some people, just like playing a video game where it says on the side of the box, if you have epilepsy, we don't recommend using this. We've never had a triggered epileptic event, but the lawyers say we should say that. That's
sure.
But we do have some medical doctors. If you're working with one of our medical doctors, we have 2,300 clinics in North America using it as part of their clinical practice, and they've actually used it to treat epilepsy. And also in AIMS, the All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences, Dr. Vivek Sharma, he's the head of physiology there. He's done some work because they're working with epilepsy, and I said, well, try it, see what happens. They can't trigger it even in epileptic people. So, but they use it to treat it because it's part of it is they can do this ablation surgery that it has been shown to help. And I said, well, if they're doing that, then what they're doing is they're creating new blood flow circulation in that area. So let's do it physiologically. We have a study going on right now in Brazil that shows that BrainTap is a digital drug. We don't produce any drugs, but what we do is we get the brain to produce the drug. Because think of cannabinoids, people doing CBD now, which is a really good product for people with stress and anxiety or pain. But the reason that works is we have cannabinoid receptors, just like opioids. When we started this for working with pain clinics, the reason was you can only experience pain in the brainwave state of beta. So if we can you show me somebody in high pain, I'm going to show you somebody who's in high beta. They have chronic stress. Their body it's kind of like a double-edged sword. They want to get rid of their stress, but as they try to get rid of their stress, they become more stressed. They create more pain, so they don't want to do it, and then they just can take a pill. But then the problem is they get addicted to the opioids. But the nice thing about our brain is we never get addicted to our own neurochemistry, so we need to trigger it. So like myself, I went through pain-free surgery with my shoulder, where my dad trained me to do it with my mind, where they took a piece of my collarbone and put it over here with a screw through it, called a bone block, but with no anesthetic. And so anesthetic is kind of optional in this world, but until you train your brain, you can't do that. You've got to use the medicine that's available.
Interesting. What is the difference? I understand you have the BrainTap app platform. What's the difference between using the app that anyone can get on Apple, iTunes or Google Play App Store versus using the BrainTap headset?
It has to do with the ATP production and also the ability to gather more theta activity. The biggest problem we have right now in our world with this chronic low-level stress and sleeping disorders is people aren't producing enough GABA. Before this vaccine deal, the biggest research money was going into how can they create synthetic GABA, which synthetic neurotransmitters never work as well as our natural ones. But they're trying to do that because then they'd have a great product to sell, right? So they're researching it. But that's probably where we're at. And I think that the biggest difference is when you're using sound alone, what we found in our initial research, and we have right now down in Valencia College down in Florida, we have a big study going on with mindfulness. In the class, actually, it's a double-blind placebo study, which was kind of difficult to do with our headset and things because we had to tell people that it's infrared light; they can't see it. But there's no light, so we're doing this study, and what we're finding is it takes about 3 times as many sessions to get the same physiological response, which is fine. I mean, the app is very affordable, so we can deliver that all over the world. But the headset, if you want it faster. In the one study that I was talking about music earlier, I didn't finish that one, but what happened was we found that both the music and BrainTap can get you to that great result that you want. It's just BrainTap did it in 2 weeks, where music alone took 6 weeks.
Wow.
And the problem with anything, just like what happened January 1st, people woke up with all these great things they were going to do with their life for the month of January, and then by January 14th, 90% of those people had scrapped it and said, well, we'll try it again next year. That's the way it is. So in BrainTap helps with that motivation. We're very lucky with our app. We have, when our doctors recommend it, we only have a 1% churn, which means only 1% of the people drop from the app month to month. And just in the general population, 8%. It's only 8%, which is better than most apps are between 25 and 30% churn rate, they call it.
Sure.
And some are worse than that, but some of the top apps. So we're very fortunate. And the average user for the BrainTap app uses it 28 times a month. So people are getting value. And as long as
using it every day.
Yeah. So if you do something, if you do it every day, that's great. But as long as you do it every 72 hours, our nervous system kind of has a cycle. Every 72 hours. That's why they found this out naturally, like with weightlifting. If you work a muscle, give it a day's rest and do it again. That's kind of the minimum of brain tapping. We did a study with women 55, 65 down in Florida with one of our doctors. His name is Dr. Kelly Miller. He wrote the book Saving Your Brain, which is available everywhere. But he's got a chapter in there called Brain Tap to the Rescue, because what we did was we took these women, and just to kind of shorten the story a little bit here, but what happened was we measured their brains. We found out that their left hemisphere is moving slower than their right. So I had to design special sessions that our clinical doctors have. And they had to do it 3 times a day, because 3 times is better than once, right? And they had to agree to that. And then we had them take the cognitive testing through Cambridge Sciences. They all were diagnosed with dementia from their medical doctors. They all tested that they had dementia. They had the brain picture of that. And so this is our pilot study. After 6 weeks, we measure them again. They take the test. They no longer score as dementia patients. They go back to their doctor. Their doctor says, wow, if you'd have came to me like this six weeks ago, I would not have diagnosed you with dementia. But once you're diagnosed, you're diagnosed. That's the way it works in the medical world. And there's no cure for dementia, right? But the symptoms weren't there anymore. So we go back and do the brain scan, and the brain scan showed their hemispheres they were balanced, and they had 49% greater neuroplasticity from 6 weeks earlier. So the key was, how can we get more energy into the brain? And that's what we're doing. So the key here is to get more energy in. That was with the full headset and light. So now what we're doing, we have a study with Seminole College, which is also down in Florida. Our research department is down in Florida, in Orlando. We have a research lab there with Dr. Francisco Cedral. So he's working. We have actually a office they gave us at Seminole College, because we're doing a lot of work with the graduate students there. And what they're doing is they're doing a longer study, and we're doing one with just sound. And what we're finding is the same way. It takes about 3 times as long, but you still get there. It just takes a little bit longer. So it just depends on somebody's budget and how much emphasis they want to put on their healing.
Yeah, no, you must have read my mind, because my next question was going to be around, consistency and frequency. How often you recommend using the product? So appreciate you. For
sleeping, let me because 1/3 of the people listening to this are going to have a problem sleeping. I always tell people, look to the right, look to the left. If it's not one of them, it's you. You're the one that's not sleeping well. And what we recommend is they get up in the morning, do that 10-minute session, because we got to regulate the brain. We got to wake it up in the morning. That's why we call it digital coffee. And then do a reboot session. If you can't do it at 2:00 in the afternoon or around 1 or 2, do it when you get home from work, at that time. And you'll have more energy in the evening. and then do a session at night to go to sleep. If they do that for 21 days, we've had about a 93% effectiveness of getting people to sleep through the night within 21 days. But then continue on at least listening once a day to something. You can choose if it's in the evening, in the middle of the day, or in the morning. But at the first, it's kind of like working out. You got to put a little more effort into it to get the brain regulating. And if you wait too long, like if somebody's really dysregulated, like feeling a lot of stress and anxiety, and you only do it once a week, you might think, this doesn't work. But it's just like anything else you learn to do. At first, I always tell people whatever is worth doing well is worth doing terrible at first. You don't worry about doing it right. And the nice thing about BrainTap is you don't have to learn anything. You close your eyes, you press play to change. The process, your body naturally does this because your body is designed to entrain to its environment. It does it all the time, and it does it with people and events.
Yeah. There are so many benefits that we've covered here. We've covered mental health aspects of, reducing stress, anxiety, just having mental clarity, improving sleep, for folks that suffer from insomnia, physical performance and athletes. Are there any other benefits that we haven't covered yet that you want to touch upon from BrainTap?
Well, I think we've covered most of them, but I think one of the main one that I want to reiterate again is the rehearsal aspect. I always, in my first book that I wrote called Awaken the Genius, I really made an effort, because this was for kids, for super learning, for accelerated learning, is you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So if you've never rehearsed something, you can't complain about it. And I have to tell this to my friends all the time when we're golfing. If they come out once a month, they're not going to golf like they did when they were golfing 3 times a week. Your muscle memory's not there. You might know what to do, but you can't get your body to participate. So it's always good to, and we all need the reboot. Maybe we don't need it every day. Like I said, some people, if they do something, but it's some kind of practice. You could even just listen to this Baroque classical music and just relax. And the thing about relaxing is to monitor your breathing. I've heard it said by some, going to India as much as I have, and we're partners with 5 of the large universities over there, including Nimmons, which is the largest mental hospital in the world. There was a yogi there we were working with, and he said that we should always just breathe through our nose, that our mouth is just for emergencies. But there's so many mouth breathers out there, and they don't realize that that's causing their anxiety and their stress. And as simple as it is to breathe, it's incredible how many people don't know how to breathe. They hold their breath all the time. They don't breathe through situations. So that's the key thing, is to listen to some relaxing music, do some of these breathing exercises. I like teaching people the 4-8 breathing, where you breathe into the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 8. When you're breathing in, you're actually triggering your sympathetic system. When you're breathing out, you're triggering your parasympathetic. And you're teaching your body to regulate. That's the main thing. Or you can do what's called box breathing, which is breathe into the mental count of 4, hold it to the mental count of 4, breathe out to the mental count of 4, hold it out for the mental count of 4, and continue that, and try to expand that maybe from 2 minutes to 4 minutes to 5 minutes. You'll find that it'll totally shift your physiology and the way you think about yourself and your world just by breathing correctly. Yep. And now that, if you haven't noticed it, when you're talking to people, you'll notice they don't breathe. Some people will be sitting there listening to you, and they're holding their breath. Right. And, things like that.
I'm so happy you brought up breathwork. It's one of my favorite topics. I'm actually reading a book by James Nestor called Breath. It talks much about mouth breathing and the importance of nasal breathing. The last few months, I've been doing mouth taping for when I sleep. Put a little piece of tape over my mouth just to reinforce that nasal breathing, and I'm noticing significant improvement to my sleep and my energy levels. And I just enjoy breath work, in general. I practice the Wim Hof method almost on a daily basis. I do practice the box breathing that you were talking about, especially, if I'm struggling to fall asleep at night. I'll do that as I'm laying there, and notice how much quicker I can fall asleep just by doing that box breathing. So, I'm a big fan of breath work. Are there practices inside BrainTap that go through breath work?
Well, I guide them through, but we have John Crimmy, who does a lot of breath work online. I had him on my Better Brain Summit that's coming up. And he's agreed to do what I would love to have some more, but I'm not an expert at breath. I mean, I know what to do, but there are people out there that this is their life, like Wim Hof. I love doing his. In what I sometimes do in the morning, almost every morning, is I'll do my 3 reps of Wim Hof, then I'll do my BrainTap session. And it's amazing when I measure my heart rate variability. When you do Wim Hof, you don't think you're working out, but my body, everybody that I've ever done it with, it's like your body's got this big full body workout, but all you did was breathe. And then, of course, the recovery, the more you do it, the better your recovery is.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's fantastic. Before I get to my last couple questions here, where can people find out more about you and BrainTap?
Well, they can go to my channel, which is drpatrickporter.com. They'll see there there's links to BrainTap there. There's also a link there to braintap.pro, where they can actually, for 99 cents, get a copy of my newest book, The Thrive in Overdrive, and they get 30 days access to the app for free. So they can go there as part of that 99 cents to download the book. That'll explain to them a little bit more. And then the social media channels, they can just, if they look me up or they look up #BrainTap or #Dr. Patrick Porter, they'll see we have quite a number of people following us. And we add things there, daily. And I'm always interviewing myself, different people that are in the field, especially in the field of biohacking, because we do a lot. We're the title sponsor at this year's biohacking conference because so many biohackers use BrainTap that we decided to step it up a little bit and get a little bit bigger presence there.
Yeah, very cool. I'll have everything linked up in the show notes and the description for people to access. That all sounds really good. I'd like to end with one of my favorite questions to ask is, what does health mean to you? Why is it important to you? And I know we've covered so much today in terms of health overall and what BrainTap does, but what does health mean to you?
Health to me means that I can gracefully move from happiness to stress and back without it disrupting my greater happiness of what's going on. There's going to be stressful events, but health means you can handle those. And even if you have a health crisis, you realize you're going to get through it. That just because you get knocked down doesn't mean you need to stay down. In other words, you can get back up. And I think a self-regulating nervous system. Most people are stuck in that low-level chronic stress, and they don't know it. So I think that adds to the unhealthiness. For me, though, it's everything. Though it's not just one thing. I mean, we have to eat well, we have to be well, we have to move and breathe. And as long as I can do those things, somebody said, "Why would you want to live to be 100?" I said, "I want to live as long as I can be as healthy as I am now. If I'm a burden on people, that's when I would say you're unhealthy." I mean, right now, that's the biggest fear in the world is that you're going to lose your memory and be a burden to your family. So, maintaining that brain is really important.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, Dr. Porter, this has been an awesome conversation. I've learned so much. Every once in a while, I'll have a guest on where, of course, I've done my prep work and research to be prepared for the conversation. But every so often, I'll leave the recording and go off and buy the book or buy the product and really dive in deeper. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with BrainTap. And for those listening, I encourage you to check it out for the host of reasons and benefits that we've talked about today. So thank you, Dr. Porter, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And it helps us to reach our goal, which is to better 1 billion brains. So the more people we can get out there knowing that everybody can improve their brain in whatever way fits them.
Sure. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. Hope you have a great day.
You too.